Welcome once again to Musings by Danon. A few years ago, I did a video where I talked about the top 10 Isekai series that didn't have an anime adaptation. Half the ones I'd listed have been adapted already, so I feel it's time to create a new list. So let's go over the requirements for a series to be on this list. But first, I want to thank you all for subscribing. The channel has had some steady growth lately, and I'm hoping to hit my goal of 5,000 subscribers before the end of the year. So, the main requirement is that there has not been an anime adaptation, either released or announced. Those who remember my previous video will recall I put Reborn as a Space Mercenary, and that anime is airing this fall. As I said earlier, half the ones I'd listed in that video from 3 years ago have been adapted. So, that is the first requirement. The second requirement is that I've read the series. This should be pretty obvious, but you'd be shocked at some of the comments I get on my videos. So if your favorite isekai that hasn't been adapted into an anime isn't on this list, by all means, leave a comment. There's a good chance I haven't read it yet. Finally, there's a whole bunch that I think have potential, but there were only 2 or 3 chapters that have been translated. It's hard to judge a series off of just 3 chapters, so I left those off. One more thing real quick, any series that has an official translation, I will post a link to down below. It is an affiliate link, so I get paid, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. I just wanted to be upfront. So let's get started with our top 20 list. Yes, that's a lot. I'm reading well over 600 series. What did you expect? This one I recently came across and fell in love with. It just barely has enough translated to make it on the list, and it has some exciting tropes that I've been wanting to talk about. Main character finds himself reincarnated as the villain inside of a popular fantasy game. One with many endings, many routes, and many waifus. Sorry, heroines. But no matter what ending the player chooses, the incompetent scumbag, Ixis Bandil, gets killed. And rightfully so. He is the antagonist for much of the story after all. So, of course, he is who our main character reincarnates into. One part that amused me the most about this series is how the main character still keeps thinking himself as a scumbag villain, destined to get murdered by literally every woman he meets. He doesn't seem to realize that by changing himself and changing how he saved those women, he has redirected their affection towards himself. So what has the hero been doing this whole time? Where is he? As it turns out, someone else was isekai'd into that role. Someone who played the game and decided it would be fun to be a bad guy. So not only do we have a redeemed villain in this story collecting waifus, we also have a hero turned villain as well. If I do another one of these videos in the future, this one may move up the list, but since we only have a few chapters out at the moment, we'll have to wait and see. Okay, picture this. You're a third-year high school boy who enjoys camping more than school. That is to say, this boy touches too much grass. One day, his entire school was transported to a strange island. No mystery powers, no elves, no dungeon crawling, but the animals on this island aren't from Earth. That doesn't stop Shinomiya Hokage, our main character, from finally being in his element. He's able to save several classmates and starts building a life on the island. Of course, it wouldn't be a story without conflict. Most of the rest of the school winds up under the thumb of a complete psychopath. So how is Hokage and his small crew going to beat these others? And how do the cute girls he saves thank him? You'll have to read it and find out. Yes, this is an ecchi series, why do you ask? Another in the growing genre of villain isekai, our main character gets reincarnated as the scumbag from his favorite Fantasy Academy game. This time, he suddenly wakes up mid-punishment session. His maid is bound before him, and a riding crop is in his hand. He remembers he gets humiliated by the hero, a mere commoner, at the entrance exams, and that he dies shortly thereafter. So, he decides to push himself. His father, who is crazy but one of the best characters in the series, decides to hire the strongest adventurer in the world to train him. So for the next 2 years, Weiss's life becomes hell. But he also becomes incredibly strong. Now, the fun part about this series isn't how the villain gets the girl. 2 girls, in fact, but that's beside the point. It isn't how he goes through training to fight against his fate. It's how sometimes the world forces a situation through him. During the entrance exams, the aforementioned hero has a duel with Weiss, and Weiss loses control. It's as if fate itself has taken over his body, and he's being forced down a specific path. This doesn't happen too often, but it reminds me of Villainous Level 99. So if you're wanting a fun series where fate sometimes steps in, and the main character gets not 1 but 2 great waifus, both of whom are also a bit crazy, you should check this series out. Okay, so this one requires some world building. Our main character gets isekai'd and is now a demon lord known as Ashtaroth. Not the demon lord, a demon lord. There are 71 more, all with more power, money, and followers. So how is he supposed to win? By being smarter and more cunning than his opponents. He also summons helpers from history who now serve him, most notably Joan of Arc and Hijikata Tochizo. Of course, his first servant is his demon maid, Eve. I'm always amused at the idea of a demon named Eve. Now, in this world with 72 demon lords, there are 72 heroes. And in the most realistic fashion I've ever seen, the demon lord handles heroes before they can become too powerful. No, wait for them to come to me BS here. He takes out the heroes before they become a problem. And the way for Astero to wake up is by killing other demon lords and taking over their territories. Fortunately, the series has an adaptation, so you should go check it out. This is another one of those main character gets no powers series, because he doesn't need them. Instead, he's able to read situations and get into people's heads. He's able to change his thinking, like how a good detective can get into the minds of a criminal. So he's able to help the rigid knight captain and other members of the nobility stop a group of cultists hell-bent on overthrowing the kingdom. In fact, when he first shows up in the world, the only reason people believe that he's a transmigrator is because of how low his mana is. He has less mana than a bug. Also, this series doesn't take itself seriously. When our main character first arrives in the city, he's arrested for looking strange and speaking a language no one can understand. Soon, he's plucked from his cell by a female knight who stuffs him in a sack and is taken to church. The priestess there casts a spell that allows him to understand their language, and they all get to talking. Now, this character is able to see to the heart of things. He's able to understand and figure out problems, which means when the night girl butchers a bunch of bandits with the scabbard of her sword, he realizes that it's because her sword is stuck. She tries claiming it's because she doesn't want to stain her blade with their dirty blood, but he sees through her. At first, she doesn't trust this strange man with his odd way of looking at the world, but eventually she comes to admire him for the skills he possesses. You could say she's a waifu, but our MC never thinks of her as more than a thug. Maybe one day he'll find a girl worth settling down with. Standard opening. Main character gets truck-cooned, gets reincarnated as the youngest son of a baron who rules over a remote countryside estate and uses his powers to change the world. Only, he doesn't have insane mana reserves or some cheat ability. No, instead he's simply bored and invents some board games. He then sells them but keeps the rights and royalties coming to himself. His goal is to avoid having to practice swordplay with his muscle-brained older sister and live an easy life. He helps cook meals because he hates the local cuisine and helps to encourage trade so he can have more money to buy books to read. This isekai is basically a slice of life, so if you're wanting something relaxing, check it out. We finally get to our first manhwa. Actually, it's the only manhwa on the list. Korean fantasy comics usually trend more towards portals bringing magic and monsters to Earth, rather than one person winding up in another world. In this series, our main character fell in love with a manga, but hated that it went dark midway through. It was a superhero manga about a girl named Stardust. She eventually becomes the most powerful hero in all of Korea, but not before tragedy strikes Seoul and thousands of civilians lose their lives. Reading about Stardust breaking as she helps to pull children's corpses from buildings caused a lot of outrage amongst fans of the manga, but they kept at it because both the writing and the art were so good. And due to the trauma Stardust went through, she gained mastery over her powers and was able to save the day in the end. Nice story, right? The problem is, our main character gets isekai'd into this world when Stardust is still an up-and-coming rookie. Sure, she's powerful and has a lot of potential, but the bad stuff hasn't happened yet. So what does he do? He decides to become a villain. He commits acts of terror. Now, Ego Stick, or Mango Stick as his fans call him, never hurts civilians, and the only people he kills are villains who do hurt civilians. He also livestreams his acts of terror. Now, because everyone sees him, they are forming their own opinions about him. Also, since he seems to be obsessed with Stardust, a lot of people assume they're dating. Now, Stardust is also becoming obsessed with him. At first she just wanted to kick his ass, but now she wants to find out what his deal is. But where we're currently at in the story, she wants to kick his ass because he keeps showing up with a harem of girls. Is this jealousy? Can a heroine be jealous of a villain? You'll have to read it and find out. And yes, this one does have an official release, but only the novel, not the manhwa. Speaking of official releases, this one comes out soon, and yes, it is the manga version. Our main character was isekai'd and became the youngest member of a rural earl house. During a border skirmish, his father and all of his brothers were killed, making him the earl. He also came to realize that this was a video game. One day he hears that a disgraced duke's daughter, the former fiancée of the crown prince, is coming for a marriage meeting. Now in the game, she was a complete monster. Rude to everyone, elitist, just a haughty villainess. But after she lost in a duel to the heroine, she was banished to the countryside and had to marry some nameless frontier noble. Wait, I'm that nameless frontier noble. What he wasn't expecting was a quiet girl with no maids and only a single case of luggage. Her face was scarred from her duel and her expression was that of a soldier, captured by the enemy with no hope of escape. Suddenly, the young Earl reevaluated the situation, especially when he saw a curse sticking to her. And not just one, hundreds. It was as if the world itself wanted to destroy this young lady and turn her into a monster. And so, our hero decides he's going to stand against the entire world. Yes, this is another villain isekai. Our main character finds himself in the body of a scumbag. He decides not to bother improving the reputation of this character, but he hates being an overweight slob. So he asks his butler to help whip him into shape, becoming skilled at both magic and the sword. And then he gets engaged to a villainess, who isn't happy to be there. But after being forthright and honest with her, and cutting down her door, she decides to be honest with him. The two wind up getting married and make it everyone's problem. Because the game he was isekai'd into was a Regency fantasy, much of the story takes place at school, and our villain soon rises to the top of the hierarchy, helped by his wicked wife. So it kinda gives Macbeth vibes, but in a more wholesome manner. Okay, so unlike a lot of the previous ones on our list, we've got a female main character as opposed to a male main character. Aoi Sensei is about a girl with a college education who struggled to fit in as a teacher in our world, being reincarnated as a child in a fantasy world. 12 years later, under the tutelage of a wise but eccentric sage, she is sent to an academy. Okay, so it's another academy series and she's the villainess, right? Wrong. She's a teacher. And even though she struggled teaching in modern-day Japan, she still had all the pedagogical training from college drilled into her. Not only is she a powerful mage, she has at least a moderate understanding of pedagogy, the science of teaching. And as everyone knows, science advances. Sure, some things are forgotten, but overall, in the 21st century, we have a better grasp of the sciences and humanities than medieval Europe did. I'll give you an example. Aoi Sensei is having difficulty with a student because he's a prince, the literal son of a king. The academy she teaches at sits on a crossroad between several kingdoms, nestled in a rather large trading town. Lots of diplomatic and merchant activities in this town, but it is also the perfect place for nobility from surrounding countries to send their children to learn and to establish diplomatic relationships with other nations. But a spoiled prince is a spoiled prince, and he will never listen to a teacher. Rather than thinking like a medieval teacher and allowing the prince to do whatever he wants, Aoi summons his parents for a parent-teacher conference. The king is initially incensed, but Aoi reminds him that she's not a commoner talking to a king, but a teacher talking to a parent. The king relents, listens to her, realizes that his son is being an idiot, and beats the tar out of him. Like, he went full teach you a lesson on this boy. This series is a hoot, and unlike a lot of other isekai. If you've ever wanted to read an isekai that takes place at an academy, but from the perspective of the teacher rather than the students, you should check this one out. And now we get to the first post-isekai in our video. Let me set the scene. There are multiple worlds, and most of those worlds have magic. Goddesses pick heroes to travel to those worlds to defeat demon lords. Heroes who survive and return home either have their memories wiped and their powers sealed, or they're allowed to attend a school full of returned heroes. Part of their assignments are to go help worlds that are overrun by demon lords. Heroes who return after defeating a demon lord are given a special mark, showing they have the blessing of their goddess. Years ago, there was a demon lord who wiped out world after world. No one could stand against them. They were the most terrifying force the universe had ever seen. But one day, they stopped. No one knows what happened, but worlds stopped being destroyed. As it turns out, she gained a sense of self, realized she needed to be stopped, and picked a boy to come to her world to kill her. Only, he would need training. A lot of training. Fortunately, the world she was on was one she had already killed. Everything had died, including time. So time was now meaningless. The boy spent 30,000 years training, defeated the demon lord, and destroyed most of her power. But he wouldn't kill her, because he'd fallen in love with her. So the two returned to Earth only to be forced into the academy. But Kyoka doesn't have a hero mark. In fact, he doesn't have any cheat abilities either. So he must be pretty weak, right? I mean, he didn't kill a demon lord, so how strong can he be? Do you love that time I got reincarnated as a slime? Do you wish it was less high fantasy and more grounded? Are you tired of every single isekai fantasy world being medieval Europe? Do you wish for a city-building Bronze Age isekai? Then look no further. The children of the forest, orphans abandoned by parents too poor to pay the taxes for them, are under the protection of the Griffin. He tasks Almus with raising these 30 orphans. They find an abandoned village in the jungle and begin the process of turning it into a village. The story goes much further than that. Trade, war, kingdom building, law creation, etc. But this is low fantasy. People have blessings that give them power, women who practice voodoo can curse or bless people, and some monsters exist. But there aren't any slimes that can devour out-of-control magic, or dragons that accidentally destroy cities. This is low fantasy. One of the inventions Almus introduces to this world is the stirrup. If you don't realize the impact the stirrup had on warfare, you need to do some studying. Regardless, this is a great series and I'm sure you'll enjoy reading it. And now we come to our first gender swap isekai. Our main character was a scientist who died and was reincarnated into the body of an orphan girl who was to be sold off as a toy for a merchant. No, I won't go into detail, but when he remembers what was done to her, he throws up. Anyway, he decides to hide in the forest until things calm down. He discovers he has magic and, using the scientific method, he begins experimentation. He eventually stops thinking of himself as a he, and she fully embraces her new identity. Yes, there is gender dysphoria in this series. There's also personal body exploration. This series is not safe for work, but I wouldn't call it smut either. It is a fun series about trying to live freely as a girl. which any woman can tell you is hard. There are 20 volumes of the manga adapted, so enjoy. One of the hardest parts of Isekai is leaving everything behind. I'm sure we've all thought about what it would be like to get reincarnated, but I'd miss my wife and kids. But what if all of us got reincarnated? What if we were all a family, only this time we were nobility? What if all of us were young again, with the chance to do it over? If that sounds interesting, check out the Tanaka family reincarnates. Oh, even the family cats are reincarnated, but in this world, they're about 2 meters at the shoulder. No, I'm not joking. This series is more slice of life with political issues rather than monster hunting. Emma, who was 35 before being reincarnated, is now 12, and her biggest concern is avoiding an arranged marriage. But her mother, 65 before and now 35, won't have it. She will have grandbabies this life. 7 volumes of this manga are out now, so feel free to check it out if you're interested. One of my favorites, and it would be higher on this list if we can get an official English release. There are 20 volumes of the light novel. Now, so many times in Isekai you get a main character who has cheat abilities and can destroy anything in his path and gets a harem of waifus. Or maybe he just gets one girl, but there's a massive power difference between the two, so the relationship seems imbalanced. Not this time. For the first several chapters, Reggie is simply exploring his new world and his new powers. He finally gets to town and signs up to be an adventurer. This is a frontier town, so adventurers are needed, but the frontier borders another kingdom, so skirmishes can sometimes happen as well. The perfect spot for a powerful individual to make a name for himself. Later on, Reggie is assigned to escort Elena, a duke's daughter, on a quest. He does so, saves her from a traitor, and the two develop feelings for one another. Part of the quest was for Elena to absorb draconic energy so she could better defend the kingdom and help her father out. So she returns home, after kissing Reggie. The two send letters to one another and eventually meet up again. Now, Reggie is still stronger than she is, despite her infusion of draconic energy, but she has more political power than he does, so it balances out. It was nice to see this in an isekai. Too bad we don't have an official release of this series, as I'd love to see how it wraps up. Speaking of wrapping up and having an official release, we've got the accomplishments of the Duke's daughter. Standard villainous opening, her engagement is annulled in front of everyone, the crown prince will instead marry this girl who really gets me, unlike you, and she's sent away in disgrace. Of course, that's the moment she's isekai'd into, so what choice does she have but to go along with it? I mean, what does she have? She has her dignity. She also has a proper education and has played this game already. She knows she's in trouble. This incident will look poorly on her father, the Duke, and Prime Minister of the kingdom. But she explains to her father that this is a blessing in disguise. After all, he never wanted her to marry the prince because, as the only daughter of the largest duchy in the kingdom, that would throw off the balance of power if she were to marry into the royal family. There are 2 princes after all, so the Duke's plan was to have her marry one of the princes, and his son attach himself to the other prince. This way, the whole royal family was supported. However, the Duke's idiot son also supported the second prince, which threw everything off. Now, with the engagement annulled, it frees her up to do whatever she needs to do. So, to keep up appearances, Iris is sent home, banished to the duchy. In reality, she's running it. The duchy becomes an economic powerhouse, the likes of which has never been seen in the kingdom. Now, this series is complete, but only the light novel, not the manga adaptation. I will let you know that the first 5 books cover Iris' story, but there are 3 more light novels after that that cover someone else's story. But if I tell you who they cover, it will spoil a very cool reveal, so I'll let you find out for yourself. Another Otome game isekai with a villainess. The heroine comes in, saves the day, gets the harem ending, and stops the war with her love magic, or something. But our main character got isekai'd into the body of a random peasant boy named Alan. He's nothing more than an NPC. So how is Alan supposed to change the world? With game knowledge, of course. Alan starts by leveling up his rank at the Adventurers Guild by doing random chores and odd jobs around the city. Eventually, he's able to find a skill scroll in the sewers, which lets him sneak into other dungeons nearby the city and steal the treasures in those areas. Alan scores high enough on his tests to enter the academy, even though he's a peasant, and pulls off all sorts of miracles. He even gets the attention of the heroine, who was also isekai'd into this game world. I've done a couple videos on this series, so I don't feel I need to explain the plot too much. What sets this series apart is the main character only starts with world knowledge. No cheat abilities, no skills, nothing. Alan literally shovels muck and manure to accomplish his goals. Eventually, he gains wind magic. He then uses that wind magic to power an airship or to fire bullets from his gun. And since he's a gamer, Alan knows the secrets of dungeons. Monsters spawn so long as the core exists. But you can use the core to teleport back to the entrance, and the monsters will all spawn again. This way he can grind levels and become more powerful. So he drags Anastasia, the aforementioned villainess, through the dungeon over and over again, helping her gain a bunch of levels. Like the previously mentioned legend, this one also has a romance between characters who are mostly equal. Yes, Alan is stronger than Anastasia, but she soon catches up to him in power, and she was already the Duke's daughter, so he would have had to be much stronger than her to be a good match for her. One of my favorite types of isekai are the ones where the main character has a ton of power and puts it to use playing around and having fun. He's more concerned with building cool toys than he is with changing or saving the world. Yuki finds himself reborn as a demon lord. His soul is tied to a core, and that core is the center of a dungeon. He's got wings, weird eyes, and something called dungeon points. These are basically experience points that he can spend on improvements for the dungeon. His first visitor to the dungeon? Lephasios, the Supreme Dragon, a creature so powerful she defies logic. Fortunately, Yuki figures out Leffy's weakness: sweets. He gives her the most powerful attack he can come up with: a chocolate bar. She decides to invade his dungeon and demands sweets. Sometimes she plays with him, sometimes they argue, but a good time is had by all. Soon, they're joined by a slime, a young vampire girl, and a giant wolf. Eventually, more girls join the dungeon, and Yuki has a family. Sure, they sometimes have adventures out in the world, but most of their days are spent in the dungeon. I say dungeon, but Yuki tries his best to make it a home. There's a huge indoor field where the kids go to play. He creates a bathhouse for all of them to enjoy. There's a kitchen where Leffy sometimes makes a mess. This is a slice of life isekai with a couple of overpowered people who just want to live a quiet life. If you enjoy farming life in another world, you'll love this series. And now we get to the more serious isekai. Haru gets truck-cooned when her idiot classmate tries to save her, and they both wind up getting killed. And in this shitty fantasy world, the only job she can get is prostitute. Now, you're thinking this is a smut series, right? Well, it is, but it's also not. There are adult scenes in this book, but they're not spicy. At least not as spicy as your standard romantasy. We're inside Haru's head the entire time, and she is hilarious. She always looks down on her customers, thinks of them as pigs or idiots, and it makes the scenes more comedic than erotic. One of her customers she describes as having no skill. He doesn't come to her to have sex, he just wants to jerk off. But she still has to try and give good customer service after all. Everyone who has read this series agrees that it's one of the best isekai they've ever read. It's not just good for an isekai, it is a damn good series. Unfortunately, we'll probably never get an anime adaptation of this series, because there's only 2 light novels. Then again, stranger things have happened. And yes, it is complete and available to read in English. If you've been a fan of mine for a while, you know I rant and rave about this series. My biggmin complaint is that the translated version has basically caught up with the original Japanese release. And the latest volume is a 2-parter. Let me explain. Min-maxing my TRPG build in another world is an isekai where the main character was granted the ability to create his character. He was given access to more character creation options than exist in all versions of D&D, GURPS, Besom, Palladium, and White Wolf combined. No, I'm not joking. He has modifiers on top of advantages on top of stat adjustments. And this is all done GURPS style, where he earns character points and can spend them on himself rather than a standard level up system like most tabletop RPGs. Now, most of the books in this series are handled like a long D&D session. I'm talking about an 8-hour-long adventure, the kind we used to have in high school. Some light roleplay at the beginning, maybe a simple combat encounter to get the blood flowing, a random encounter on the way, and then combat with the big bad after concluding who the big bad was and foiling their plans. I'll use Book 2 as an example. Eric, our main character, leaves home for reasons that I won't explain because it'll spoil the ending for the first book. Eric and his traveling companions are journeying to the capital. One night at an inn, he encounters a fairy who is very interested in him, but he knows how to handle the Fae. On Earth, in Eric's previous life, he was an avid tabletop gamer and knows better than to promise the Fae anything. So the fairy's impressed and decides to stick around. After traveling for some time, Eric is tasked with investigating an abandoned house. It turns out there was something dark that happened in this house, and it relates to what is happening to Eric's family. It is as if the Dungeon Master is showing Eric what will happen if he doesn't follow through with his quest. The entire book is about the Fae, and it is told as a travel tale, as Eric is moving from one area to a new area, the capital of the Empire. Along the way, we learn about the Empire, everything from a bit of history to how taxes are collected. All of the events seem random, but they help to add to the story and the world at the same time. And the book concludes with Eric and his traveling companions arriving at the capital. So, the story continues, but this is a good stopping point for the D&D session. Most of the books are like this. They add to the world, we're introduced to some new characters, the adventure continues, but the session comes to a stop. The problem is, some of the books are split in two. We have a mid-session break, but the story continues. It's not quite as bad as a cliffhanger, but it's not too far off. Book 4 is split into 2, Book 9 is split into 2, and Book 11 is split into 2. Problem is, Book 11 Part 2 was released on July 20th, in Japanese. And it's over 500 pages. So we're probably waiting another year for this one to come out, which gives you plenty of time to catch up on the rest of the series. This series has the best world building I've ever seen, a good balance of comedy, drama, and action. There are serious parts that take your breath away, parts that make you cry with laughter, heartwarming parts, and even some naughty parts. Not a ton, but they do exist. The problem is, I have no idea how they could ever turn this series into an anime. There is so much happening that they'd have to give it the Mushoku Tensei treatment. Build an entire studio dedicated to just making this one anime, and give the animators enough time to cook. This is absolutely a slow burn, but the stakes get higher and higher with each book. Eric has more and more to lose as time goes on. So where will this next book lead us as he continues to try to live the life of an adventurer on the frontier? Only time will tell. What about you? What are your favorite Isekai series that don't have an anime adaptation? Leave a comment below. Also, if you'd like me to do a more in-depth video on any of these series, let me know. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, a huge shout out to my editor Cutestuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, she can be reached at cutestuff.edits@gmail.com. Link is down below. If you're looking for ways to support the channel directly, you can head on over to patreon.com/Danon. There are several tiers to choose from. You can pick an anime or manga for me to do a video about, or you can join our monthly manga club. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons: Waffles, Marcus, Brett, Roxy, Alex, Robert, Pye, Kazaris, Patrick, Boomy, Ostera, Sleech, Luke, Mr. Salty, Daniel Zombie, Brian, Waka, Talathia, Azander, Michael, and John. You guys are awesome. I post anime or manga videos often, or you can click here to watch additional videos. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time on Musings by Danon.